In this video, I'll be making some pet beds from some reclaimed pine bed slats from an old futon bed frame that were recently given to me by a friend. They were in various lengths and about 70mm wide by 16mm thick. I first did a drawing to work out a cut list for what I wanted to make, and I worked out that I could make 6 of the beds, and I'm making these as things to sell either online or at a craft fair. I put quite a bit of thought into these plans, and the beds were designed to be items that would be quick to make so that it would be possible to make a reasonable profit on them when they sell. Most of the slats had screw holes near the end, so I trimmed off those bits at the miter saw, then I set up a stop block and started cutting all the pieces to length. I'd already worked out how to get the most out of each length of wood to minimise the amount of waste. So this first batch of pieces would make up rectangles to form where the mattresses will be. I used wood glue and pin nails to hold the rectangles together using only butt joints. These wouldn't be particularly strong, but they didn't need to be, as I designed the bed in such a way that the strength of the bed will be provided by the legs. I used a speed square during assembly to make sure that the corners were at 90 degrees. I also tried using these corner clamps which I bought recently, and I think they will be really useful on some projects, but on this particular project I found that they actually slowed me down if anything, so I soon reverted back to just using a speed square again. Then I cut a bunch of short pieces to form the legs. I used a push stick to hold the pieces down to keep my hands away from the blade. So these are the pieces that would form the legs at the footboard end of the bed, and here's how they would be laid out. I applied glue and then used another slat as a spacer to create a gap wide enough to fit the width of the slats in later. Then I added some weight and left it for a couple of hours for the glue to dry. When the glue was dry, I then trimmed off the edges of each leg at the table saw to remove the rounded over edges. Then I could trim the ends of each leg flush at the miter saw. As you can see, the rectangle pieces now fit nicely inside the legs at the bottom of the bed, so I added some glue and nailed them in place. Then I started working on the legs at the headboard end of the bed, and they were formed of a short piece and a longer piece glued together. Again, I stacked them up and added some weight until the glue dried. I then ripped the edges clean at the table saw again, as I had for the legs at the bottom of the bed. And trimmed the ends again on the miter saw. Here I'm ripping down some strips of pine to about 20mm square to use as a cleat to support where the mattress will be. These were cut to length at the miter saw and then glued and screwed in place on the inside of the rectangle. I used a countersink bit to drill the pilot holes. Then I cut some more pieces, and these would form the headboards of the bed. These were cut to the same width as the rectangles I assembled earlier. For assembly of the top of the bed, I added glue and fitted the rectangle to the legs. and then glued on the headboard pieces using spring clamps to hold them in place. Then I could trim off the excess length of the legs flush with the top of the headboard, and I did that on the bandsaw. Then I searched through my sheet materials to find some pieces that I could use to support the mattress. This was a good project for using up a lot of small offcuts of OSB and MDF that I didn't have any other use for. I cut these to size to fit inside the rectangle of the bed frame and be supported by the cleats, and I made those cuts on the table saw. The next job was to make the mattresses, for which I used some salvaged foam. I had one cot mattress which I found in the free section on Gumtree, and a damaged leather seat cushion which I found in an alleyway. And this cushion was real leather too, so I salvaged the leather, and that will be handy for making strops. I measured and marked up with a Sharpie pen and then cut the foam to size with a sharp knife. And I'd sized some of the beds so that I could get 3 beds made out of this piece of foam. I've got quite a bit of this cream coloured fabric, and this is good quality stuff which I bought quite a while ago to upholster a couple of chairs in another project which predates my channel, and I think out of this material I should be able to do 3 or 4 of the beds. I marked up and cut the fabric to size. And the idea for these mattresses is that they'd be upholstered similar to how a chair seat would be done. I used my new air stapler for this, which I bought specifically with this project in mind. I'm not great at upholstering things, but I found a useful guide on how to do it on YouTube. I did get slightly better at it with each mattress that I made though, and the last couple turned out quite nice. Next I did some sanding at 120 grit with my random orbit sander and eased over the edges to make them more comfortable to the touch. I'd use antique pine brie wax to finish the bed frames. I chose this finish mainly because it helped to blend in the colour of the pieces that had been cut with the darker aged colour of the rest of the pieces of pine. Finally, I stamped on my maker's mark to the bottom of the bed frame. That's the pet beds finished, and I made 6 of them in total, although 5 are only pictured here because one of them sold before I got to take a photo of it. The smaller beds came out a little bit smaller than I'd have liked, but they'll be okay for a smaller cat or dog. The intention was that I would sell all of these pet beds, but my cat Dylan took an instant liking to one of them and claimed it as his own. When I ran out of the cream fabric that I used earlier in the video, I went to my local fabric shop and bought some offcuts. So one of the beds was finished in a faux sheepskin and one was done in faux fur. I also tried out a rounded headboard on 1 or 2 of the beds, and that was just cut out using the jigsaw. This project took me around 15 hours, and that's for all 6 of the beds, and it was a really simple and easy project to put together. All of the materials that I used were free, apart from the fabric offcuts, which cost about £6 in total. That's $8 US. I've put together some plans for the larger cat beds that I made, which will include full dimensions and a cut list, and they will be available on my website. And the bed frames don't specifically need to be made from pine bed slats. You could use something like pallet wood instead. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I put out a video every week on a Friday, so please subscribe for more. And if you want to support my channel, please click like on the videos, subscribe, and you can also become a patron of my channel over on my Patreon page. Links in the description box below.